Hello and welcome to another video. This one's going to be a look back and review on a slightly older machine now. This one's been in my collection for about 4 years. Possibly, yes, it was about 4 years, I think. 2013, something like that when I bought this. And it's had a little bit of use, enough for me to be able to assess its abilities. And with this machine there have been a few issues which we will be going into further in, but it has got a few redeeming features as well for a Vax. This is the Air 3 model, this Vax, which means it had multi-cyclonic separation and a twin motor, which means it had a separate motor in the brush roll for the suction motor, so you could turn it off on hard floor, and it had a detachable handle here that you could use as a wand. What other features did it have? All I know is that I didn't pay a lot for this. It was on substantial special offer. I can't remember whether it was in Currys or whether it was in Argos. I think it might have been Argos, this one. I think it was about the £100 mark, and they started off at over 200. So you know how it is, they always price something very much higher than what they expect for it, so they can say was £249.99, now only £119, massive savings. You know, the old sales hype, you know. So what we'll do is come down and have a look at this machine in closer detail, because there are some issues that I need to highlight. These are still available on eBay to buy, these sorts of things, the Air 3. They do differ from the original Air in that they have the swivel neck, but they do have a different type of cyclonic separation. So let's have a look at it in closer detail. Okay. Now, the handle is it's reasonable height, so I don't have much trouble using this machine in terms of height. But unlike the original Mac Air that I reviewed on my channel, this does not have a adjustable height handle. It's a fixed height, and in order to remove it you would press down on that latch there and remove the handle like so. Okay, now that handle was able to clip onto the hose, and I'll be going into that a little bit later on when we talk about the hose. And on the end of the handle there you were able to put your tool. So the tool was basically that there, which was the standard Vax multi-tool for the time. Not a bad tool, a little bit short crevice tool, and the dusting brush wasn't particularly long, but it was better than some around on the market at the time. It had the upholstery tool on the back, and you were able to get your wand handle and push the tool onto the end of there for extended reach. This machine didn't come with a turbo brush, but obviously if you had one you would be able to use the turbo brush on the end of there should you want to. So if we put the wand back inside here and it just clicked down, on the top here you had two buttons, one on either side. One of these was the brush roll on off button, and the other one is the button for the main suction motor. So again, like other Vaxes of this style, you could turn the brush roll off independently of having the suction on, so you could use it on hard floors. But there were problems with that as well, so we'll go into that shortly. On the top here we have our bin release button there, and we can see the top of the bin here. It's got a suction relief valve built into the top there, so that when it got blocked, or if it got full, or there was a blockage of some kind in the hose, that would start hissing very loudly as it drew the air in through there, alerting people that there was a problem, although I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't have realised what that was there for. Okay, so coming down the back we have a cable and the two cable hooks. Now Vax on this machine did provide somewhere to store the multi-tool, and as far as I was concerned that was actually quite a good way of storing it that way around. The other type used to store it in that fashion, and it wasn't as secure like that. So that was pretty good, having that storage there. Coming down again now, we could remove, I think these were swivelable both ways, the quick release. Yes, they were, but I don't think you could do, yes you could. So let's just take the cable off from the back of here. On this machine, because it was like a base model, you could only have a short cable with it. Now this was only 6 meters, and the reviews on the Argos website were such that people were always complaining that the cord was too short. So at 6 meters, it's one of these where you're going to have it for a small house, or you're going to have to be not minding replugging it in every room you're going in, because 6 meters is not the longest cord. The cable enters the machine at the bottom here, and they do provide a cord hook at the top of the handle, although when I was using that quite frequently used to keep falling out of there, so it's not really, it's there but it's not very much use. These cord hooks they provide, I wish they'd provide a more substantial one that actually held the cord in position, that it didn't keep dropping out. That I did have a trouble with. That strain relief, it actually got pulled out of the machine pretty soon after I had it, so I had to open the machine spine up, and what had happened was the cord grip inside had come loose, and then the cord had started pulling out of the back of the machine, and this was all hanging out, so I had to re-secure that in. I suppose I should have phoned Vax really, but when you're messing around waiting in all day for engineers to turn up and then they don't turn up, I just couldn't be bothered with all the hassle. So I fixed that myself. So that was the first issue I had with it. Oh, these dogs, you'll have to just excuse the dogs. She is absolutely driving me nuts with these dogs next door. They never shut up barking. They're an absolute menace. I'm sure Roger's dogs aren't that badly behaved. Molly and Daisy only bark when there's a delivery man, but these dogs just bark all the blooming time. She's got them in the backyard at the moment because I think she's sick and tired of them being in the house. Right, so the stock label. Its model is a U87-AA-B, and the wattage is 1200 watts. And there it is, what we expect for something from Vax, made in China. Okie dokie, so going down here we've got the floor head. 2 wheels on the back there with the rubber coating on them, which isn't too bad in all honesty. And here we have our brush roll in the front, which used a very similar sort of design of front, so I think what they used to call on the wind tunnel. So it wasn't too bad in general at picking stuff off the carpet. It had the belt just here, and what I did find is that quite a lot, that section there above where the belt is, that's where the dirt would come through from that side of the brush roll there to go into that side, and quite frequently that would get blocked up. You can see there's actually dirt trapped there now, but it would quite often get blocked up, that would. So you'd have to push something up there to unblock it. It looks like there's a screw there in the brush roll, and I think the reason they put those in was to slightly offset it so that it would provide a bit of agitation on the carpet by just providing that off balance to it. It's the same sort of thing as what they do in the Dyson DC40 and 41. I believe they actually put weights inside the brush roll to slightly set it off balance, and the action of the slightly off balance brush roll makes an enormous amount of vibration in the bottom, which is what causes that very, very dramatic bouncing up and down of particles on the floor next to the floor head, and it's really pronounced when you use the rice on the carpet. Here we have, going around the side, the stretch hose, which really wasn't very long at all. And again, this was another point where people complained on the reviews about these, is that because it was the base model, it only had a very short hose, and there was no, unlike the Reach version, there was no extension hose on the side. So this is all you got, basically. So if we unclip it from the machine, essentially that's it. When you pull it up to the top of the machine like that, there's the top of the handle, and that's how far the hose stretches. So there was no cleaning your ceilings with that hose, unless you picked the machine up with one hand and had this on the end. So this hose end here is another area that I had issues with, in that the actual stub on the end where you fix the tools was only very short, and what I tended to find, if I used the turbo brush on, for instance, is that it would keep falling off there because it was only so very small. It wouldn't hold on very well. You could put the multi-tool on it, but again, it was such a loose fit that very often, you know, it was on the end there, you'd be wobbling around with it and using it, and it would just fall off. There wasn't enough friction on the on that socket there to hold the tools on properly, and that was very, very irritating when you were trying to use the tools and having to keep holding them on with your fingers like that so they wouldn't drop off the end. And similarly, when you put the handle on, you were able to clip the hose to the end of here, but if you put any kind of pressure on it, it would tend to fly off because it just wasn't a very secure fit on the end of here. So it was it's very difficult to try and do this with one hand. You'd have that in, but if you put any kind of pressure on it or pulled it and tried to stretch it, so let's say we were going to stretch the hose here to do the to try and get up to the ceiling, put any pressure on, and it would just pop straight back off. So again, it was it was a bit of a dead loss, to be honest. The hose was on this machine. You couldn't really use it on the handle because it kept popping off because of a very poor design of hose cuff, and the tools would keep dropping off it as well. So I wasn't very impressed about that. And again, it just shows the pretty poor level of thought and testing that went into these machines. If they'd have tested this extensively before they'd launched it, they would have seen that was a problem and done something to make sure that that didn't happen. Quite a few people commented that the hose kept popping off and the tools wouldn't stay on the end of it, but Vax just didn't appear to listen. You know, they just... I just can't understand, you know, how they can create a product and then not rigorously test it for simple basic faults like that affect its usability in quite a bad way. So this had a swivel neck, so you were able to knock it back like so, and it would swivel from side to side. But the level of swivel on this, I mean, whilst it was reasonable, if you went round a corner too quickly, you would tend to lift the floor head off the floor. So it didn't have the sort of manoeuvrability that the Dyson ball has. What Vax are trying to do is copy that, but whilst it worked to some extent, it wasn't brilliant. Let's put it that way. Here was a little switch on the top there. That was basically that when you pulled the back down, that the brush roll would come on. That was the recline switch that would switch the brush roll motor. And you had two lights in here. When it was working properly, it would glow green, and if it got obstructed or you got a sock caught in it or anything else, the brush roll motor would stop, and the red light would come on here and flash. So you'd have to clear your blockage and then press that red button to reset it, switch the machine off, back on, and it would come back on again. So that was that. Underneath here we have the floor head. So now we can see the base plate here was fixed on by two clips here, very much similar to the Vax Air, but it also had a screw. So if you hadn't got a screwdriver, even if it had clips on, you couldn't get it off without a screwdriver. And on this, the top didn't come off either, the clear housing, like it did on the Mac Air original version. Now the brushes on this, the orange brushes, were very stiff, so it actually did agitate quite well, and it would pull the dirt up. But these brushes would tend to leave a lot of lines in the carpet because there was big gaps in the brush roll here. I think the Dyson DC41, the original version, had this same issue because it had these bars across the sole plate and big gaps in the brush roll. It used to clean, but it would leave big lines in the carpet, and I wasn't really very impressed with that either. So in the areas where it did sweep, it was pretty good, but it would just leave, as I say, these really annoying lines in the carpet all the time, and no matter how much you went over it, you'd always keep getting these lines because there was such big gaps in the brushes. Again, it was a miniature brush roll, so it was quite easy that you got things wrapped round it, and that would have been a problem really for people where there was long hair in the household, where women had long hair. But here there's only me and I don't have long hair, so I didn't find that an issue, but people with long hair would have done. They'd have been forever having to keep chopping the hairs off this brush roll. I believe as well, if you used it on carpet pile that was too deep, the brush roll motor wasn't able to cope, and it would keep cutting out because it strained the motor too much. I think the problem was worse on the later models, which had less power, which were the 700 odd watt ones. They were okay on short pile like this, but on anything longer pile they struggled. So that was the underside. So now we come onto the bin and the cyclone design. Now this is where what initially looks quite similar to the original Mac Air, except it isn't. This cyclone doesn't work anywhere near as well as the original Mac Air. And if I take the lid off, let me just put this down here, and we'll take the lid off. Again, you would twist the lid round to the side and pull it off, and then you would be able to get your filter out like so. Now this filter would not stay as clean as the Mac Air, the original. This would get dirtier more quickly because this system had rather a big flaw. Okay, and I'm going to show you what that is now. So, very similar to on the original Mac Air, you were able to lift the entire assembly out of the bin like this. And on the original one, this is why I had to put the sellotape around the top here, because during use this used to lift up slightly, like that, inside the container, and it would break that seal at the bottom, and the dirt would get drawn in from the bottom. This one doesn't do that, but it's got another issue. So there we have your bin. It's not a very big bin. Then again, Dyson bins aren't very big either, so you have to empty more frequently. You had a bottom drop latch there. You'd press that and the bottom of the bin would come open, but a lot of dirt would get wrapped around this shroud and you'd have to clean this on a regular basis. So what the issue was with this is that the cyclones here wouldn't discharge directly into this collector tube here. If you were to look up there, basically you wouldn't be able to see the bottoms of the cyclones up that tube. So what happens with this is that if we remove that down there like that, and then we turn that round and pull that down, what we can see is that on here the cyclones discharge into this sort of chamber here. The bottom of the cyclones empty out into this collector chamber, and what's supposed to happen is that that collector chamber, as it fills up, is supposed to, when you're moving the machine round, discharge itself down that pipe there and then come down the collector tube in the bottom here. So you've got an exit from the collector chamber into this pipe. But in reality, it doesn't do that properly. And all that happens is, rather than coming down this pipe here, it starts to just build up in here too much. And then what happens when this is pretty full, it then starts to clog the base of the cyclones up. So therefore, then the cyclones haven't got anywhere to discharge their dust to. They haven't got any. I can hear her now shouting at the dogs outside in the yard. I don't think she can cope with them, to be quite honest. I mean, I've never known such a badly behaved pair of dogs in all my life as those dogs that just constantly yap. What earth she bought those animals for, I really don't know. Terrible, terrible animals. Okay, let's get back onto the subject. They just depress me, those dogs do. Really do. I wasn't sure whether I could carry on recording videos with them going on in the background like that, but I can't let them bother me that much. Okie doke. Right, so these cyclones, as I say, they would discharge into here, they would get blocked up in the bottom, and once that had happened, they would start getting clogged up inside the cyclones here, and you'd be able to see it when you looked into the top. And then as a consequence, all that would happen then is that this top filter would start to get dirty very, very rapidly and clog up. So all in all, that design, it doesn't work in practice. Well, it didn't work for me. You can see the principle of it there. As you're moving it up and down like that and banging it around, that the dirt would dislodge and then fall down that tube, but it just didn't work. The thick dust inside here just mounts up in there and clogs these cyclones. They are not good. So the Air 3 system, I'm afraid, the cyclonic separation was nowhere near as good as the original Mac Air, which was a much better system. So what we can do is we can put that on and then put that back together again, like so. We'll put it in to here, like so. Put our filter in. What I might do with this actually is do a big mess test on it, see how this cyclone copes with that, and then I might dismantle this afterwards and then see how it's coped in the bottom of there. Because obviously it's another thing that Vax had designed but never tested in practice. They might say they tested it, but they couldn't have done because it got clogged up. In the bottom here was the exhaust filter, like so. You'd lift that off, and there was basically the paper plated filter which would catch the carbon dust from the motor. Rather a noisy motor in there, but there we go. So that is the overview of the machine. It had some problems, the biggest one being there that the cyclone system didn't work on this machine again. Very much like the Air Revolve, it would clog up and then just clog the pre-motor filter. So let's plug it in and we'll give it a push round and see it in use there, and then I might consider putting the big mess test down. And will we get our first failure on the big mess test with that? Yeah, let's wonder. Let's give it a push round in the back room then, before we end. So let's just switch this off. What we can see here basically is what I was going on about with the lines. As we look across there, all we can see is basically it's just full of lines from that brush roll, and I don't really like that very much. I think that looks there's grooming lines and there's just a mess, and that just doesn't look good to me. That brush roll has far too many gaps in it, and it really, whilst it will clean, it just doesn't seem to do a very good job with the pile. It's a very, very cheap quality brush roll and floor head in that machine, and it shows when you use it on the carpet there. It's I wouldn't say it was a screamer motor as such, but it's quite loud and high pitched, and the floor head motor is also quite loud as well. When you compare it to the Dyson there, which is extremely quiet with the floor head, that reminds me more of a Shark machine, that does. I find them to be very very penetrating, Shark, especially with the brush roll motors. So to be honest, I don't really enjoy using that machine at all. It's not a very pleasant experience. The floor head being on the hinge, like this, I mean, it's not too bad, that isn't. And it's not too bad. So, you know, I've used worse, let's put it that way. It will manoeuvre reasonably well, and it's very light, so those are its redeeming features. I mean, this is a really, really light machine. It's only about 5 kilos to pick up. And when you haven't got the handle on, you know, because you've got that really, really short hose on there, you need to be lifting it up all the time to get anything done. But the fact that the cyclone system doesn't work properly, and it's eventually, it doesn't, obviously you don't notice it straight away, because it takes a little bit of time for that chamber to fill up with dirt in the bottom of here. And when you empty the bottom, you think you're emptying it, and the tube doesn't have anything in the middle, because it's all building up in here, in this container here. And it's only after a couple of months maybe that you might notice the filter start to get really dirty quickly, and then you notice the cyclones themselves are getting blocked up inside, and you look down into them. You shine a torch in, you can see all the bottoms all with fluff and dirt as it builds up the cone. So I'm afraid it's another failure from Vax here with this one, to add to the long list of other Vax machines that I've had that I didn't like, that had too many design problems. So far, the only machine that I've actually thought was reasonably good was the Vax Air, the original Vax Air that was launched in about 2011, 2010, that I have done reviews on. But even the second one of those, the Reach model, I had issues with quality control with the cyclone. It had issues with hoses falling apart, where the ends of the hoses wouldn't stay on and kept dropping off. This one here, the tools won't stay on the end of the hose, they keep dropping off. Rather than the cuff dropping off, the tools won't stay on. It leaves big lines in the carpet. The cyclone system doesn't work properly. The handle on the top here is it just doesn't seem very well finished off on the top. It just seems very poor quality plastic there. And it's a reasonable handle, but the top of this doesn't seem very well finished at all. I can't really say anything else on this one, I'm afraid. It's about a 4 out of 10 machine, this is. Not very practical at all. We'll do the big mess test on it and see how it copes with that, just for a bit of fun, and see how that cyclone and filter cope. I'd imagine there probably won't be much of a problem first, because I've only just emptied and cleaned all this out, so it might take a while for that to build up. But there we go, another Vax there that, if you see one on eBay, a Vax Air 3 with that type of cyclone system in it, give it a miss, because they're not good. Big design problems with it. So I'll see you again very soon.